This week, Everyone is Tulip. That's the title of a new graphic novel from the team of writer Dave Baker and artist Nicole Goux. I talk with Dave and Nicole about their collaboration, what they hope to say with the book, the overemphasis on comics writers over artists in terms of who gets credit, why rejection in publishing doesn't really exist, and more. Then, Jason McNamara and I give you our 2 cents on the book. But first, if you're enjoying this podcast, support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. My brother Paul and I, hosts of To the Batpoles podcast, have been doing bi-weekly videos available to all patrons of TV trivia from the late 20th century. More perks and bonus content at higher donation levels, including our ongoing full-length podcast on 1960s Spider-Man comics. Pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
This is Jason.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Jason in Portland. How are you doing?
I'm delightful, Tim. How are you? Thank you for having me back.
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, I thought you might enjoy this book. We were sent this book called Everyone is Tulip by Dave Baker and Nicole Goux. And when I get a submission like this, I'm thinking, okay, maybe this will be good for critiquing comics. And then I looked at it, no, this is a professional job. They don't need our pointers. So I thought, okay, this is a Deconstructing Comics, and
what should I do, Tim, with all the pointers? I made lists of pointers for these. Oh man, how embarrassing.
Well, it's when we're reviewing, we could do good, this, I like this, I didn't like this, but I don't think they need too much in the way of story structure or word balloon placement or that kind of thing. So I did an interview with them, which you're going to hear now, and then Jason and I will come back and review this book.
Can't wait.
Okay, I'm on the line with Dave Baker and Nicole Goux. How are you guys?
Doing all right?
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Sure. So now are you both kind of in the Los Angeles area?
Yeah, both. Nicole's from here, and I'm originally from Arizona, and I moved here. I honestly don't know how many years ago at this point.
Okay, so that's why Becca in the book is also from Arizona, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There are definitely commonalities with both of our. Oh no, the alarm going off, making sure I didn't miss this recording session. There are definitely there are commonalities within the book that are kind of taken from both Nicole's personal life and my personal life, and then general things that are just kind of observed from being in Los Angeles. And I work in new media, and Nicole's worked in various media environments as well. So there's this kind of there's a way that life works in those circles that is kind of in the book.
I see. Well, I can understand that. The novel that I'm probably never going to finish, or at least not until I'm about 80 at the rate I'm going, but it's kind of the same thing, bits from different parts of my life, and yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so first just introduce yourselves and tell us what you've done before this. So, Nicole, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Nicole Goux. I am a cartoonist and illustrator. I've done a bunch of books, including Shadow of the Batgirl. I illustrated with the writer Sarah Kuhn over at DC. Dave and I have done a bunch of self-published work. Fuck Off Squad is kind of our main one, but we've done a book called Murders and Suicide Forest and This Is Not a Girl Gang and a bunch of other stuff, as well as some mainstream work. I've done, some Gem and the Hologram, some Star Trek, a bunch of covers for different things. Yeah, that's basically kind of where I'm at. And Dave and I have a new book, the book that we're talking about today, which is called Everyone is Tulip, as well as a book coming out from Simon & Schuster next year in 2022, which is called Forest Hills Bootleg Society.
Okay.
Dave?
So we fuck sleep, am I right? We just work all the time. I'm Dave, as Nicole said. We work a lot together. I also am a cartoonist in my own right, and I did the books Action Hospital that I co-drew with a bunch of people and wrote, and then I have the book Night Hunters, which is a science fiction dystopian miniseries coming out from Floating World currently, and a Star Trek miniseries coming out from IDW called Seven's Reckoning, which the collection of that comes out in July, I believe. I believe it's like July 20th, maybe.
Well, what is Action Hospital? I'm intrigued by that title.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a kind of high concept world where in the near future there is a hospital that services otherworldly beings and creatures with extreme maladies or unconventional needs. And we follow a large ensemble cast of nurses and doctors and patients within the hospital as they attempt to work through whatever these situations may be. Like one of them is the first Black Pope, and she has this condition where there's bacteria in her brain that's turning her brain gold. And the only way to solve it is by black magic, and it's this whole thing of like, can the Pope, who's the head of a religious institution, accept a medical procedure that is, a satanic, and then there's, kind of like big sci-fi ideas like, shrinking down Fantastic Voyage size to go inside people. And it's basically just the hospital is just a kind of blank canvas to do whatever weird science fiction idea that I have at that specific time. And the way the book works is that I write all of the stories, but there are these various cast members that kind of come in and out of the stories, and each one of those cast members is drawn by a specific artist. So whenever the character shows up, they're always drawn by the same person. So sometimes there's like 5 people drawing on the same page. Sometimes there's just one person drawing for an extended period. And Nicole, that's kind of how Nicole and I met. Is she was drawing one of those. She wasn't in comics. I was like, hey, do you want to work on this weird collaborative comics project I have? And she was like, oh, yeah, that could be fun, and started drawing one of the characters, and then we kind of became friends, and then we just kept making all this stuff together.
I see. Well, so Action Hospital, it sounds a little bit like Gumball, with all these different-looking, differently created characters.
Yeah, I'm going to grab a copy of it really quick. I mean, this won't help the podcast, but it'll help you. This is kind of what it looks like. So I drew the cover, and it's, these kind of like large ensemble casts. And then, some of the pages are kind of cartoony style. Like this is a page drawn by Kyle Carrazza, the creator of the Cartoon Network show Mighty Magiswords. This is a page that I drew of a giant 3-headed alien monster with a mouth coming out of its chest. So yeah, it kind of spans the gamut of all types of work.
I see. Okay. So starting with Nicole, how did you get into comics? Because everybody has their own story. There's no 2 people get in the same way, I think.
Yeah, so as Dave mentioned, I wasn't initially intending to do comics. I went to school for illustration, and actually initially drawing and painting, and then illustration as I narrowed my focus. And I graduated and was doing some, illustration work for a toy company and not really getting to where I wanted with the illustration stuff. And I met Dave, and he asked me if I wanted to draw this 8-page comic for Action Hospital, and I said no. Because I had never done any comics before, and while I had been really into manga when I was kind of a preteen and early teenage years, and I read, the newspaper strips, like, since I was really little all through high school, I never really, other than being 12 and being like, I'm going to move to Japan and be a mangaka, I never really saw it as a career, and I was never really interested in American comics. My brother read them, and they were kind of like, I watched some X-Men, but I never got into them at all. And he tried to force some stuff on me later where I was like, kind of like this.
Watchmen, read Watchmen.
He bought me Runaways and Fables and a couple other things, and I just kind of didn't connect with them in the way that I had with manga. And so I didn't really see it as a career, but, I was kind of floundering a little bit when I met Dave and not getting into editorial in the way that I wanted to. I sent out hundreds of postcards, which is an outdated way to try and get work, and didn't have a lot of luck. And, we started doing this. I made a page comic. It was fun. Dave and I started hanging out a lot. And we decided to make another comic that's kind of a mini 3-panel strip about a trip that we took, a fictionalized version of a trip that we took to the Grand Canyon. And, we did a Xerox zine copy of it and did our first little mini zine fest called Zine Melt, which was at the no longer existent Meltology, which is a really famous comic store here in LA.
Meltdown Comics.
What did I say?
You said Meltology. That was their other anthology thing they had.
Meltology was another event at Meltdown Comics that we used to go to.
Okay.
Yeah, at Meltdown, kind of just in the back parking lot. It was teeny tiny. I think we, paid a small table fee, set up our 2 books and 30 stickers, and then I had the experience of taking something that I had made that we printed ourselves and handing it to someone and them being excited about it and taking it home and reading it. And that feeling just absolutely hooked me. I couldn't get enough. And then Dave and I started more actively making kind of bigger books and more time investment,
Okay. And Dave, how did you get into comics?
I'm kind of a lifer, man. I've kind of always made them, as a little kid, I made movies with my sisters and animations with Legos, on a stop motion camera.
Oh, wow.
And we would put on plays in our neighborhood. And I've always kind of been that kind of person of the, getting the band together and let's go make a thing. The first comic I ever made was an X-Men fan comic. I was obsessed with the X-Men as a kid, and I made a fan comic where Nightcrawler was the leader because he was my favorite as a kid. But it always made me irate that Nightcrawler had this immense power, but he was so nice. I was like, no, but he looks like a demon. He should be angry and he should kill people. And so I made.
You shouldn't be a Catholic priest.
No, yeah. So I made a silly little fan comic about him, basically leading the X-Men and being forced to being pushed past his limits and almost having a re-origin, and he gets broken by all these Brotherhood characters that are come to the X-Mansion and attack all the X-Men, and so he just starts teleporting around, teleporting people's heads off.
Oh my.
Yeah. 12-year-old me was really into that.
Not approved by the Comics Code.
No, not at all. But yeah, I've kind of just made comics on and off since then. Bill Sienkiewicz always says that he feels like he didn't choose comics chose him. And I feel the same way. For better or for worse, I feel like it's almost like a holy war, or like a calling to a greater purpose, where I just believe that this is the greatest artistic medium in the history of man. And I think it's the most pure and precise way of self-expression. And I think that I wish that there were more people who took it seriously and really wanted to make something impactful and really wanted to change the world with comics. Mm-hmm. And I genuinely believe that they have that capability.
Sure. Okay. So what kind of comics did you read growing up? What was your favorite?
When the comic that got me into comics as a medium was Tintin by Hergé.
Oh wow.
That was it blew my mind as a kid. And I didn't even really know at first that it was a comic, because I was really into Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. And then at the library, they just had a bunch of Tintin stuff that my mom was like, oh, this is a boy detective thing. You'll probably like this. And it didn't really make sense to me that it was a different medium. I just saw it as another thing, but it was cooler because you could see it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, from there I kind of branched out into mainstream superhero stuff, and then from there independent comics and manga and bande dessinée, and I kind of read a little bit of everything now. And Yeah.
Okay. And Nicole, you mentioned manga. What were your favorite titles?
I was really into Uwatase, so she did some books like Fushigi Yugi and Ceres, and I was really into Rurouni Kenshin, which
Kenshin.
like
Okay.
now. And a bunch of stuff. I don't have like an amazing memory, so I feel like so many of the things that I read were like single volumes that I picked up at like some garage sale or some used bookstore, and a lot of it is just kind of like ephemera that I got rid of at some point and now don't even really remember what it was. But there's a lot of good stuff.
You were really into Fruits Baskets too, right?
I love Fruits Basket. I only actually watched Fruits Basket when I was younger. I didn't read it in college. But Marmalade Boy, I liked a lot of shoujo stuff, girly stuff. And then, I read some of the other stuff. I liked Yu Yu Hakusho, and I had like a box set that I think someone bought me at a garage sale or something. So I had like a full box set of that, which was great. Yeah, kind of like mixed. I spent a lot of time watching stuff and reading stuff. But yeah, so much of it has kind of like disappeared, which is bad. But yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Dave, tell us what Everyone is Tulip is about.
Yeah, Everyone is Tulip is the story of Becca Harper, who is a girl from a small town in Arizona who has dreams of moving to the big city of Los Angeles and becoming an actor. And after working for a period at a fast food restaurant called Shiver Me Burgers, which is a kind of pirate-themed McDonald's parody, she ends up moving to LA and gets sucked up into the high-stakes world of internet performance art, which is a real thing. And it kind of warps her life to the degree that it causes her to reckon with the ideas of how far are you willing to go to get what you want, and what is the Rubicon that you will not cross, and where is the line between kind of a sense of self and identity and an external constructed persona that the internet facilitates.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because the main point I got from it was a different one.
Interesting. Which
was that she didn't appreciate what she already had back in Arizona. She asked her dad if he loves her, and he says yes, and she says she doesn't believe him, and she dumps her boyfriend, and then later realized that, too late, that she did love him. So it seemed to be kind of being distracted from what was most important in her life by this dream that she had.
Yeah, I think those are absolutely components to it. I think there is a with any creative person's life, there is a requisite number of sacrifices that you have to make, whether that's time or energy or, loved ones, whatever that manifests in for the individual. Yeah, I think that definitely is a component to it. Yeah. And I think the underlying theme that we were interrogating of this kind of how far are you willing to go, I think the points that you brought up are intrinsically linked to that. At least for me, they're linked to that, where it's like, are you willing to sacrifice these relationships? Are you willing to have a sense of perspective? And does this pursuit compromise these other aspects of your life?
And Becca is sort of obsessive about this dream while simultaneously not actually putting all that much effort into it. And, the question for her is kind of which is more important, the dream, which in the case of her is sort of this hollow fame. Is that more fulfilling to you than real relationships, your family, your, what might have been a really healthy relationship, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. So we've been, one of my associates on this podcast and I, we're working on a series where we review as many Stan Lee biographies as we can handle. And the dynamic with her kind of impresario in this sort of reminded me of that, like kind of argument over who created this or that. And I imagine that exists in a lot of cases, not just Marvel Comics.
And Becca's co-creator in this book is named
Stanley.
Stanley, right. Okay.
Stanley.
Sure. Yeah, I got a little bit distracted. He has a nickname, or his kind of artist name is, I forgot. What is it? Paradox. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But so was that intentional, that his name is Stanley?
I mean, I won't say anything officially, just because I think that's in the eye of the beholder.
Okay.
You never know what you want people to bring their own assumptions to that, or own viewpoints, but also, you never know.
Well, I'm just waiting for the dialogue moment that says, "I created the Fantastic Four." So.
Yeah, or one that just says, "'Twas Steve's idea," next to him standing next to a giant poster of Doctor Strange. I think that theme is something that's very interesting to me too, because it's intrinsically Sisyphean. Like, there's no way to really unpack the creative process and compartmentalize and give, in air quotes, credit to, like, this person deserves more because they thought of that component, and this person deserves less because they didn't do X, Y, or Z. And that's something in non-art circles that I don't think the general layman, especially in comics right now, I don't think they have a good grasp of the fact of how important an artist is to the creative process of making comics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for this book specifically, like, I don't know that there is another person that could make this book this way other than Nicole. I could write this same script, like this exact script, and give it to someone else, and it could have been cool, but it would not have been this book.
Yeah.
And I think
also, you wouldn't have written this script if you weren't working with me.
Completely.
Because we came up with this idea together. We discussed it from its birth and through many changes. I did notes passes on the scripts. It's something.
Added pages, added whole scenes.
Yeah.
Like, it is a true collaboration between the two of us, and
also with our colorist, Ellie.
Yeah, and Ellie Hall, the colorist. Yeah, absolutely. It's very it's irksome to me when I see people on Twitter saying Ed Brubaker's criminal. You're like,
no, like Sean Phillips had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, come on. Like, it's just, it sucks that it's, we're kind of like living in like a 30-year pendulum swing back from the 90s, where like artists were in control and they didn't have a story sense, maybe, or those specific artists didn't have designs on stories other than hyper commerciality, right? That's what they were trying to do. And a lot of that work is really good, and a lot of that work is really bad, just like every time period. But since movie companies and intellectual property themed mining publishers have come into comics, they've realized that the writer, it's easier to sell the writer, in air quotes, and because of that, the reader base has picked up on this idea that the writer is the auteur, which is just fundamentally incorrect. We
also just live in an individualistic society that wants to believe that one person is the creator of something, that this is the brainchild of a person and that you can do it yourself, when it's just not that. I mean, if you're reading a novel, that is for the most part the case. That if you go look at a painting, that is for the most part the case, which is really true because so many masters used apprentices and those kinds of things. But as a society, in Western society, we want that idea. We want that power of like, look, I made this thing.
Yeah. Kind of Steve Jobs.
Drake,
totally.
Steve Jobs had no help. He created all this stuff by himself.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me because we live currently in a culture that, especially here in LA, that values film so much, which is essentially the opposite of that. It takes an entire crew of people to make any one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we still do this thing where it's, Steven Spielberg's blah, 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 or whoever is attributing this entire creative work to an individual, which is just not the reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure. So what's the process of getting a book published by Dark Horse, and is it any different from working with other publishers?
Yes, I think it is a little different. Every publisher kind of has their own way they do things.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically with Dark Horse, we had put out a comic called Fuck Off Squad that Silver Sprocket published,
mm-hmm.
which is kind of a coming-of-age romance comic about a bunch of teenagers in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote it and Nicole drew it, and it had come out, I don't even know the year anymore, 2019, 2018, 2020, 30, 35.
Back in the before times.
Yeah,
September of 2018, I would say.
Yeah, so the book came out in September of 2018, and around that same time, we were doing a lot of conventions. We were traveling all over, selling the book, and an editor at Dark Horse came to our table and said, "Hey, my roommate showed me your book, Fuck Off Squad. Do you have other things like this? I think Dark Horse would be interested in publishing something like this from you guys." Mm-hmm. And that started a dialogue, and we kind of went through the process with them where I had pitched a couple different ideas, and then we landed on this one, mostly because Nicole was already making it. Like, she had made, I don't know, how many pages did we have when we started talking to them?
Probably about half. Dave and I had been self-publishing up until that point, and we're just making whatever we wanted to make with no publisher to answer to and no plan for publishers to answer them. We were making pitches and sending stuff out, but we weren't letting that process stop us from creating the thing that we were making. So we just made the book. I think we started it it would have been January of 2017. And I, during the middle of this, got the job to do Shadow of the Batgirl, so I had to basically draw an entire book in between and during making Everyone is Tulip. So we were probably about halfway done, if not more than that, with it when we started talking to Connor, our editor, who's really great. And so we were mostly done. I think we had to do all the color and probably about 50 pages left.
The process was we showed them the stuff we had. They took it to an editorial meeting, talked about it, and then said, yes, this is something we'd like to publish. And I think, honestly, a significant portion of that is because of Nicole. Because of her kind of reputation in indie comic circles, and also, the model is a giant publisher puts something out, and then an indie publisher coasts off of that. And I think nobody at Dark Horse has said this to me. I'm just reading the tea leaves and being they saw Nicole is a little bit more of a sure thing now because of this Batgirl comic that's going to be a very wide release on this young adult imprint. This is a young adult thing, kind of. We could probably have some synergy there. Let's do it.
Well, and also Dark Horse at the time was kind of starting to develop a straight to GN line, which we fit pretty squarely into. We've had a lot of luck throughout our career of hitting the right style, hitting the right trend at the right time, which is not even at all intentional. But what I make is something that kind of fits into what's popular right now, and what I want to make is graphic novels and YA stuff, which is kind of what's popular right now. So we've had a lot of kind of kismet when it comes to that stuff.
Mm-hmm. I see. Dave, did you find it hard to write a young female character, or was Nicole helping with that? No, a girl this age wouldn't do this.
It's interesting. No, I don't. No, I didn't really. Yes, Nicole helped, but in the same standard way that Nicole always kind of helps, in that, she gave notes on all the characters and kind of the world and what the themes of the book are, and helped sculpt all of that stuff. And, I think specifically the the book is it's a reflection of literal people in the real world who have done this. So it's pretty easy to kind of triangulate, like, oh, this influencer did this in this way, and that influencer did this in this way. Okay, so then if we want to have that triangulation, our character will be over here, and they will approach it in that way. Yeah, does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
I think so.
I also think it helps that you exist within the kind of media and film space here in LA and have a lot of interaction with people who do the things that our characters do. You know?
That's true.
Film people, theater people, YouTube people, that kind of stuff. So you have a lot
definitely
of kind of research and R&D.
Yeah.
I see. So in this book, we see Becca as Tulip saying everyone is Tulip in many different outfits. And Nicole, I was wondering how you came up with all the different ideas for what she's wearing and all those different panels.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is inspired by actual YouTubers who do similar stuff. Some of it is just me going through kind of images from haute couture fashion shows. There's a lot of, that stuff just gets so insane on the runway where it's like...
No one would ever wear this.
I was watching a TikTok video, I think, of some runway thing where the dress that this girl was inside in a giant bubble that was like attached to the ceiling, and then something came and popped the bubble balloon, and it like fell down and became a dress. Just like, how do people even think of this stuff? So I took a lot of inspiration literally from fashion runway stuff, and some of it was just like, it would be dumb for this person to have a chair on their head. Like, as weird as I could get, I was trying to just like push that stuff. Let's have a scarf made out of hands. How about that?
I think
both of those
the
literally
chair, that chair or table, the table hat is my favorite one. It's just so stupid. It's so stupid.
Yeah, I mean, these people, the characters, the idea is supposed to be ridiculous. So any way that I could try and push that, I was really trying to, while still being high fashion.
I see. Okay. So, I'll go ahead and ask this. How do you seek out opportunities in comics? How do you go about looking for new work, or do you? Does it just sort of show up, as it did for you with this book, with just doing it and somebody finding it and saying, "Oh, let's work together"?
I would say that's a multi-leveled question. But for us, this is not the case for everyone.
Sure.
The most important thing that we have found for finding work is to go to conventions, be in the scene, talk to people, make friends, and kind of put your work out there, and also have completed work to show. You have to have something to show for anybody to trust you to do 200 pages of comics or 5 pages of comics. If you don't have sequentials, if you don't have proof that you can finish something, nobody's going to hire you for anything. So a combination of being in the room, being part of the community, and then also we make pitches and we send them to editors, and we put a lot of effort into doing that. Now we have an agent, but initially, I don't know how many emails Dave has sent to editors, like thousands, It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and it's I don't like to think about it because it's so much work that it makes it kind of depressing thinking about the amount of time that I've spent just like, hey, so-and-so editor that I saw their name in the back of the book I liked. I really like the book you worked on. Here's some stuff that I worked on. And then emailing them again in 3 weeks, even though they haven't emailed me back. Hey, just checking in to let you know that blah, 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 blah. And then whenever we have a new book out, going through a giant, I literally have a spreadsheet of editors and publishers and independent comics people. And I'm actually in the middle of sending around a book that I drew that Nicole did not draw, that just I drew right now. And I literally have a giant list of 50 different names where it's so-and-so, the publisher at Rinky Dink Publisher X, so-and-so, the publisher at, this, mid-sized publisher, and you just send it to everybody and see what happens, see what conversations can come from that. And that's the thing that I've kind of learned, is that rejection is a false positive. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as rejection. There's just a delayed approval or delayed success. You just keep talking to the same people, showing them stuff, being nice, continually saying, look, I'm not going anywhere. I got some ideas. Whenever you're ready to hear them, I'm around.
There are very few people who you're going to send them your stuff and they're going to say, I hate this, never email me again. Like, that doesn't happen. Worst case scenario, they're like, cool, when you improve or you need to do a little work on this, talk to me in 6 months, talk to me in a year. Or I have a full docket right now. I don't have space for you. And that often is not a reflection on you or what you're making at all. They might love it, but a lot of the time it has nothing to do with you. It's all about timing. It's all about knowing the right people, unfortunately. And if you're amazing, maybe your work will shine through and whatever. But even then, it can be hard to get work. And it's all about starting those conversations. And like I said, knowing people,
Yeah, like we got Fuck Off Squad published by Silver Sprocket, which was kind of the thing that jump-started everything, specifically because I went and talked to Avi at conventions every time we were at the same convention. I just went to their booth, talked to them, basically showed that I wasn't a crazy person, and then, sent them the PDF when it was done and was like, hey, this is the thing. What do you think? And then followed up a couple times. And then eventually it was like, you know what? I think this would work well in our catalog. And I was like, I knew it. Fuck yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, we also have kind of a rule of send everything to everyone, but there is something to be said for tailoring what you're making to a certain company that you want to work for or editor. And with Fuck Off Squad, what Silver Sprocket makes is shitty punk kid zines, and what that book is shitty punk kids. So getting that book in there was I won't say it's a safe bet because it's never a safe bet, but you're kind of like, this will probably go because they like us, this book fits there, they're really open to accepting new work right now. There's a lot of check marks, boxes to check, I guess.
I see. So, Nicole, Tulip, did you do this? Do you usually work digitally or do you draw on paper?
So this is the second book that I've done fully digitally. The first one being Batgirl. So I started off completely traditional with maybe some gray tones, digital gray tones, and have sort of gradually transitioned from that into digital pencils with traditional inks to fully digital. And then the thing that I'm working on right now is back to digital pencils with traditional inks because I miss having paper and stacks of pages. But particularly for client work or for really long books that I have to do on deadline, I'm just not fast enough to do it traditionally. I work so much faster, and it really helps me to make the page look like it is in my head because, if you draw something on paper and you mess up the size of something, you have to erase it and redraw it, where if you like that drawing, it kind of fucks you up, or you can't get it right again, or whatever it is. Well, when you work digitally, you can just move things around. You can finesse things in a way that's really hard. And especially if you're expecting notes, fixing anything on traditional pages is just... Yeah. It's possible, but, it's just awful.
Kind of a nightmare.
We, when we go to shows, we like to look at kind of some of the original art tables and stuff, and I'll look at these pages that have whiteout all over them. They'll have entire faces covered with whiteout and redrawn, and I'm like, it just makes me want to cry because, not only is whatever is under there gone forever, but then, I'm just imagining that person trying to draw on top of the whiteout, which is so hard. So, it makes things simpler for me. It streamlines the process a lot, and it's super portable, which It's amazing for me. I can, when we go to a show, I can take my iPad with us and, in the hotel room without having to lug around big pages and ink and all that stuff.
I see. Okay. What's the best piece of advice you've been given? Dave, would you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I think there's two things there. One, I think it's less a piece of advice and more just like a lesson learned, which is that there was a period of time where I wanted somebody to anoint me. I wanted to just be able to make the comic and not have to worry about printing, not have to worry about going to conventions, not have to worry about submitting to publishers, dealing with editors. I just wanted to be able to turn the thing in, and I wanted the art to be the only thing I had to worry about. And I spent years just kind of like squirreled away in a hole working on books that no one ever saw, because there was some false narrative in my head that if I just made something that was good enough, people would find it. And the lesson of just doing the thing, going out, being at conventions, really producing the work, doing the shit that you don't want to do, mailing packages that people buy on stuff on your website, sending all those emails that we were talking about earlier to editors, like dealing with printers. Like I have 2,000 books in my apartment right now. Do I think in my entire life I'm ever going to sell all those books?
Yeah, that's what makes you a comics creator. If you've got all these comic books in your closet and everywhere else.
Yeah, and I think that kind of was a big turnover for me, where it was just kind of like, no one else is going to do this. If I don't literally will this into being and really chase down this dream, it will be a dream for the rest of my life. And once I had that realization, everything started changing. That's when I started doing Action Hospital. That's when I started meeting all of these cartoonists and making friends and putting out work, and everything changed. The other little piece of advice was, I don't remember who said it to me. I think it was a famous comic book creator, but I'm not going to say their name because I'm not sure it was them.
Okay.
But we were at a convention, and they said to me, I'd seen you online, but I wasn't aware that you had this much work until I saw you in person over and over again, and you basically wore me down by just being around. And then he bought comics from us. And that was a big, it's not really advice, but that idea of just wearing the system down that was again, a big learning moment where it's just like, okay, I will grind it out.
Yeah, I think the first 5 books we did everything ourselves. I taught myself InDesign. I designed all the titles and inside covers and, just every little dynamic. And then Dave and I both worked with the printers, and we shipped every package ourselves. And, I think a lot of people have this expectation of the publisher will do all that stuff. I just have to make the pages. And if you wait for that, it might never happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's even kind of the reason, we're talking right now is because I emailed you. You know what I mean? It wasn't the Dark Horse publicity department. No. It was, me literally going and we have a giant Google Doc of 300 podcasts. And I'm just emailing all these people just trying to be like, hey, do you want to talk about comics? We made a comic. You want to be friends? Want to be friends?
Yeah.
And that approach to life, is not easier, but it's definitely more rewarding than waiting on a couch, staring out a window as rain hits it with sad music playing.
Okay, Nicole, did you have a piece of advice you'd been given?
Yeah, mine is not. I'm trying to think of anything that someone specifically had told me, but I can't quite come up with something. But I have more lessons as well that I've learned, or possibly people have said this to me, but I don't remember. There's 2. One of them is the adage of finished is better than perfect, which, if, like I was saying before, if you have nothing to show, then you have nothing to show. If you spend 5 years planning out this big epic 40-issue run, but you don't want to start it because it's not perfect, because your skills aren't there yet, you're never going to get the skills because you learn by doing. Like, how are you going to learn it if you don't try doing it? And then the other one, which is related, is to start small. So Dave and I started, he'd been making comics for a while, but we started with an 8-page comic, and then we did a 20-page 3-panel strip thing, and then we moved up to an 80-page comic, and then we moved gradually up, and when things are smaller, it allows you to finish them quicker, then you have something to show, and you get the experience quicker of making the thing. You know? And so I think a lot in terms of cons, just because that's how we've kind of built our career, but having things to put on the table to show people, to prove that you can do it, to, you know, make a little cash so that you can print your new book or whatever it is, you know, feed that back into your business. That is like essential, I think. And obviously not everyone can do cons, and not everybody thinks in those terms, but I think it's applicable to all creating of things. Of like, if you want to learn to do something, if you want to get into something, start small and finish your projects. Great to have 70 ideas, but if they're all just ideas, no one's going to make them.
Yeah, well, I'm as guilty as anyone of starting out with a huge project that I never finish.
I mean, it is fun. Like, if you have that big project and you really want to make it, fine, but also make short stuff, you know? Like, just put something out in the world so that, like, when you finish that big project, people will know who you are.
Yeah, I find writing short things is harder than writing long things.
It is.
It absolutely.
Completely.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Yeah.
It 100% is.
Because then if you can write this short thing, maybe the big thing will be easier, you know?
Yeah. So what wouldn't you do without? Dave, what's your answer to that?
Oh, man. In what context? Are we talking about, like, what could I not live without? Because,
well,
like,
let's say in terms of your comics career.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I think the two answers there are, I think my life would be fundamentally different if I had not met Nicole.
Damn it!
Okay, never mind. I won't say that one. I'll say something else because Nicole is going to say that one. I'll let her have that. I think that there's a sense of kind of, there's a sense of joy that is derived from learning new things. Like, I really like reading weird nonfiction books about things I have no interest on the surface of or whatever, or like, I'm fairly autodidactic, so I really like the act of like looking through things and learning about, like, oh, spelunking is a crazy thing or whatever. I mean, I don't actually care about spelunking, but maybe I do. I don't know. But I think that there is something that most of the successes that I've been able to accrue derive from that curiosity, which is such a hokey, man, you gotta ask me this question, I gotta give this bullshit hokey answer of like, I'm really glad that I'm naturally wired to be an inquisitive person. Like, but I am kind of like, you know, that's something that I'm very proud of or take pride in that I've honed that skill. You know, I wasn't always somebody who was autodidactic. It's a skill that I've learned. And I am very excited about that. And I take joy in learning new skills. And the other answer to that question is the real thing that I could not do without is this Tuvok from 7 of 9 figure that sits on my drawing table every day and watches me draw. That's the real answer. Live long and prosper. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, Nicole.
Well, and we know my answer now.
Yeah.
But I was like, this is sappy. But legitimately, I would not be in comics if it wasn't for Dave.
Mm-hmm.
And that is on many levels of just literally I would not have pursued it if he hadn't asked me to do this. But also, like, we have the conversations that Dave and I have about comics, about both the comics that we make and stuff that we read, are so kind of inspirational, and we really break down and have these really wonderful conversations about the medium and about the content of these books and the way people draw things, and it really makes me excited about making comics. And I physically would not be able to make the amount of work that I am making and also go to cons and book plane flights and do all these things without having a partner.
Mm-hmm.
Having a partner in this has been absolutely invaluable to me, and especially someone who does a lot of the things that I don't want to do, like email editors. And then I lay out the entire book in InDesign and draw 200 pages of it. But,
No, you know what? I take my answer back. That is my answer. I am thankful Nicole does the InDesign because I hate InDesign so much. That is my answer.
At this point, we are kind of no longer doing that so much.
Look, you say that, but Nicole co-designed all of the interior design for Everyone is Tulip. She art directed the whole thing, basically. She's being falsely humble here. She is very skilled, very knowledgeable, and has a very acute attention to detail that there are multiple periods of time towards the end of projects where I will be like, fuck it. We've hit an impasse. This last 3 years is for naught. This book is never coming out. And Nicole's like, calm down. It's going to be fine. I'm going to figure it out. Don't worry. That's the real answer.
It's one of two things. You're either like, fuck it, let's do this in a different way. This isn't working. And I'm like, no, we just need to figure this out. Chill out for a second. Or it's done. It's totally done. And I'm like, yeah, I penciled the last page, but do you understand how much more? This is 6 months of work that we have to do after this point. And you're like, it's done, we finished. And I'm like, you haven't worked on this in 10 months. Why are you saying it's done?
Yeah, there's a lot of cheerleading, I think, on both of our parts, where we balance each other out well. And sometimes when you're running these marathon races, you're just looking for a reason to try and big the other person up or try and celebrate, even when that celebration is completely false and just not warranted. But making comics takes forever. It takes years. So you have to find those little victories to be able to be like, we can do it. We've just got one more hill, even though that one more hill is going to take us probably a year and a half, and then there'll be 6 months of waiting for the printer, and fingers crossed it doesn't get fucked up in shipping and held up at customs. But don't worry about that. We just got one more hill.
It's a process.
So you talk about going to cons, but of course the past year plus there really haven't been any. So how are you managing your career in the pandemic?
I think we've sort of taken a pause. We've definitely taken a pause on cons, but we've sort of taken a pause on the actively pushing new stuff for a couple of reasons. One, because it was not possible, and two, because I've been kind of knee deep in these books that we're making already. So we do have some pitches. We have an agent who is out there pitching our books for us, or these ideas for us, hopefully actively. But when you're knee deep in making the stuff, it's kind of like, yes, it would be very helpful and it would push our career forward to be out there and talking to people and building these relationships. But we're at a place where we've been doing this for 5-6 years. And so we're kind of baby established in the industry. We don't need to prove ourselves quite so much. And we're in the thick of it on these other books and projects. So doing that while having an agent pushing the book or the new next thing has kind of been like, well, for this year, that's going to be enough.
Yeah, I think would it be beneficial for us to be seeing people face to face? Yes. But I feel like this year has also redefined what success is for a lot of people. And I know for me, success is, and I don't mean this in a cheesy way, but success is being alive. Success is we're around, we're doing the work. Maybe we're not making the strides that we would normally measure a year by, but you know what? 2020, man, we narrowly avoided a dictatorship. We had 500,000 people die from a highly contagious virus that half the country doesn't believe exists. And if we, failed to talk to an editor at a convention, really don't think that's that big a deal in the big scheme of things.
Yeah, we just kind of put it all on pause. We're just taking this year, not worrying about it, and hopefully next year we'll get back at it and kind of double down on those efforts. But this year was just kind of like, nah, not worth it. I'd rather not die.
Yeah, and also it sounds like you were at a point in the cycle where you didn't need that so much because you already had work set up from before the pandemic started. So it was fairly good timing, I guess.
Yeah, we talked about that repeatedly, being like, man, what a blessing of just like, this pandemic hit a lot of people really hard, and Nicole and I were both very fortunate that the timing happened to be whatever the timing was.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the middle of drawing a 200-page book, which I do from home anyway, so I was like very grateful to have a job, be actively busy as a way of distraction, and kind of just be doing my normal thing while inside my house and never leaving and whatever. But the amount of difference that it made in my life versus made in other people's lives was minuscule. We just was feeling very grateful for that, even if we couldn't see friends and we couldn't do this and I couldn't go to a coffee shop for work and all of that stuff. And obviously we were watching world burn, which was very stressful. But in the scheme of things, 1 year of not doing cons is fine.
Okay. So what's coming next from you? You mentioned you got another book on the conveyor belt here.
So Everyone is Tulip comes out in bookstores June 29th, I believe. Comic shops is the 17th, maybe?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And then next year, summer, I think? Yeah. Probably summer of next year, we have a book coming out from Athenaeum at Simon & Schuster, which is called Forest Hills Bootleg Society. And it's about a group of high school girls in 2005 who decide to start a hentai distribution ring, bootleg hentai distribution ring in their very Christian high school. Kind of the foils and relationship troubles and all those sorts of things that causes.
I see. Okay, great. Looking forward to the next book then. So thanks a lot for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Dave is at heydavebaker.com. Nicole is at NicoleGoux.com. That's Nicole with no H and Goux, Goux. Coming up, Jason and I review Everyone is Tulip. Don't forget you can help to unlock classic early episodes of Deconstructing Comics, help me return all the old episodes to this podcast feed, and at the $4 level, get access to hours of additional podcasts about MCU movies and the early Amazing Spider-Man issues by Lee and Ditko. At the $10 level, you can review the book of your choice with me on the podcast. Support this podcast and our other shows at patreon.com/deconcomics. Or you can send a one-time donation via PayPal to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
Sawate. My name is Stella, and I am the host of Back Row to Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast. Back Row to Oracle is a podcast dedicated to Barbara Gordon, the first woman to hold the mantle of Batgirl for an extended period of time, roughly 1967 to 1988. The goal of Back Row to Oracle is to examine the character's history from her first appearance as Batgirl and continuing through her tenure as Oracle. Each episode looks at a vintage issue of Detective Comics or Batman, as well as other books like Justice League and Freedom Fighters, and modern issues of Batgirl and Birds of Prey. I also keep track of news involving Batgirl and other members of the Bat family, and I have a revolving series of segments like Babs in the Tube, which highlights appearances of Babs in TV and film, Shipper Spotlight, which looks at a variety of comic and pop culture couples, gives their history, and determines whether they are hot or not, Reading with Stella, which could be described as an audio drama, or just me reading a book that relates to Babs or doesn't, and of course, the mainstay literature recommendation. I have been blessed to interview writers Scott Beatty and Chuck Dixon on their Batgirl Year 1 work, Brian Q. Miller on his Batgirl run, Dwayne Swarzynski and Christy Marks on their separate Birds of Prey work, and the creators and actors of the Batgirl Spoiled, the web series. I hope to interview more creators and actors in the future. My goal, most importantly, is to make a fun, entertaining, and thoughtful show that people enjoy and from which they learn. Find the show online at thebatmanuniverse.net and iTunes, and follow the show on Facebook and Twitter at Batgirl to Oracle. Thank you, and fly on, Babs lovers.
All right, so we are back, and you heard the interview, and so let's talk about this book, Everyone is Tulip. So, what were your kind of first impressions of it?
Well, I'm glad you asked, and I'm going to give them to you right now. My response is, everyone is Tulip.
Okay.
And that's going to be my answer to everything that you have to ask me in this interview. I loved it. is the thing.
Okay.
So I am so tired of. There's a lot of comic book things I'm just tired of. I've been reading comic books, I don't know, 40 years, 30-something years, a long time. And I feel like I've got the people punch each other in the face genre pretty well, like, just drilled down. I don't need any
either
more
superpowered or not.
Yeah, I'm kind of burnt out on zombies. I'm burnt out on a lot of things. It's hard to get me excited about a lot of things. I am not tired about books in this space. So I love a comic book or a story in general that is about a very specific world and a very specific sort of like perspective in that world. This is not a place I spend a lot of time in the YouTube sensation or the YouTube character world. I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it. I don't understand how people make millions doing it, and I'm mad that they do. Because I've been toiling in comics for 20 years, and you know what it got me? You see, I'm in a new environment, right? My wife bought a house, and I get to live in the garage. So, boys and girls, make comics. One day, you too can live in your spouse's garage. So, when it comes to YouTubers, I don't go near that world. And as they talk about a little bit in the epilogue, the e-commerce world, all these things are changing every day, and it's just not my world. So that you can create a compelling story in this space that I'm wholly ignorant of and make it compelling and as well done as it is, I am elated. I was tired last night. I had other things going on, and I thought, okay, I'll start this comic. I had to finish it. I couldn't put this down once I started it. Because it was that well done. So my initial reaction was, oh, this is really well illustrated. Oh, this is really well colored. Oh, this is well written. It has a theme. And then I was just swept up. So my initial thought was, give me all of it right now. And if I have any negative things to say, it's that I didn't have a chance to read it twice. But I will. Because I was really taken with this. And I'm glad you put it in front of me, because it's not the type of book that I probably would have discovered on my own.
No, me neither.
Yeah, just because I'm on a budget, and the title alone doesn't tell me enough of how actually really, really smart and well done that it is.
Yeah, I would see it on Comixology, and like, okay, I don't know what that is. So
yeah,
I know the art style might attract me to it, because sometimes I'll take a look at the description of something if I like the art. But yeah, I probably would not have even known about this.
You know, I didn't know that I liked the art until I got into the story, and then I loved the art. But if you just showed me a page or two out of this, I'd be like, I don't really know that that's my thing. But for the service of the story and the composition and the talent behind it, I became really, really taken with, I don't want to mispronounce the name.
Nicole Goux.
Goux' work is fantastic, phenomenal. And here's the other thing. So I make comics as well, if anyone doesn't know. And I teach comics at PNCA. And I would probably talk people out of making a script like this, because it's way too long. It's 180 pages. And Nicole does this thing where there'll be like a moment. It's a double page spread, and she zeroes in on a particular human moment, and then there'll be another double page spread where they zero in even more and punch in on that moment even more. So now you have 4 pages that is just a moment. And I will tell my students, do not do that because you're not quick enough to do it. As you will spend months on 2 pages. And for my collaborators, people like Greg Hinkle, who I think is one of the best illustrators on the planet, that dude is slow. I would never give him 4 pages of one moment. But if you're quick enough and you're good enough with deadlines, and I believe this artist absolutely is, because this is 170 pages of illustrated work, and that they took the time to really visually make these like human moments pop, I was just flabbergasted. And that's a really bold thing to do. You have to be a fast artist and a good artist to even attempt that. And I was really blown away. I was really just really impressed, and really thought to myself, oh, maybe I should stop talking my students out of doing this, because it really does. But I couldn't pull it off, and my collaborators can't pull it off. But this artist, Nicole, absolutely can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Big props.
Yeah, I enjoyed reading it too. Sometimes people send me these comics and I start reading it and it just becomes kind of a chore to get to the end. But yeah, I kept going on this. I even read the essay in the back, and I enjoyed it too.
Yeah, I skimmed it for time, but yeah. So where do you want to start? The coloring was good. It was really, so the theme of the book. There's so much going on in the book, and I just love that it's a book. If you could tell me something new about the world that I live in and inhabit, I'm all about that. I love it. Like, educate me about this world that I'll never be involved in. And what would you guess the theme of this book is? Did they tell you in the interview?
Yeah, we talked about it. Well, they were talking about, Dave was saying, like, how far would you go? Or how much would you sacrifice to get, your dream, to achieve what you want to achieve? And, she goes to Hollywood and she wants to act and she wants to be famous, like many, many, many people do when they go to Hollywood. So she achieves some level of success, and is she rewarded for that? Has she given up too much? And what I said in the interview was, I kind of got the other side of it, where she gave up things, and now that she's given them up, and she dumped her boyfriend and left her dad, and now she's regretting it. And she wishes that she hadn't done that.
I didn't get that from the book. For me, I thought it was just a tragedy of the things that you will do to be seen the way that you want to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an identity issue with her and the character that she is playing. There's the ownership of the creepy boyfriend, and where does the character end? Where does the person end? Where does the person start? Where does the art end? The boyfriend, and I only read this once, so I can't remember his name, but he's got a great, Burning Man name, and a very smackable haircut. Like, he's going to smack this dude as soon as he sees his haircut. But he has all these little bon mots that you would hear from somebody in art school. I felt like I'd been in a classroom with this guy many times. And so he has a different name. He doesn't use his real name. Everyone is sort of putting on an artifice of who they think they should be. And anytime you have who you think you are and who you actually are, and we're all living in the chasm in between who we think we are and who we actually are.
Yeah, well, the Svengali who recruits her, his name is Stanley, and he goes by Paradox.
Right. So he's his own Paradox, right? So Stanley is not a cool name. So he goes by Paradox. She's got a different name. She's got a real name.
Yeah,
so
her real name is Becca.
Identity?
Becca, but she goes. Yeah. She in these videos she is Tulip. They attend these events and they have to be kind of in character at these events and call each other Paradox and Tulip.
Right. So what's fame? I just really there's a lot to chew on here. So I was curious what they saw as the theme. To me, it was just wanting to be seen as who you are, but who you are might not be enough, right? The compromises that we make to be an artist, to be creative. There's a lot of art stuff in here. There's a lot of you can tell these people have worked in comics before.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of this the main guy being like, no, I own this. It's my creation. They're fighting over the creation of a person. So the human being becomes transactional, but collaborators will often sometimes argue over who's in charge of what. I'll also say that the supporting characters in here are all fully developed. No one is window dressing in this story. So Tulip, there is a young lady who is sort of the camera person and does the costuming, and she has this whole other life.
The one with the pink hair?
Yeah, she's a child, and she can't be seen as a mother because then she won't get work.
Her name is Chloe.
Yeah, so how do we value mothers, right? Like, we'll look down on someone for having a child, or she couldn't get as much work. She wouldn't seem as cool. I just liked all of it. Like, she's a fully developed character. The roommate is a fully developed character.
Yeah, Eve.
So there's a competition with Eve. Eve is a classically trained actress, and Chloe's getting work that she didn't train for. So there's jealousy. There's all these things going on. There's a little bit of sexual tension between her and the roommate at one point. I thought it was really, really well done. I also love that this book, not to spoil it for anyone, it doesn't have it has a downbeat ending.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's open to interpretation what happens, which I like. I don't like being force-fed. The theme. I don't being force-fed a conclusion, but it's open to interpretation. I think I know exactly how it ends and where these people are going next, and it's not a uplifting, like, fist in the air moment. It is life is a compromise. Art is a compromise, and fame for sure is fleeting. I don't know. I loved it from top to bottom. I was really, really impressed with it.
Yes. Actually,
there was one balloon in here I wanted to criticize.
One balloon, okay.
There is one, yes. Shame on them. But yeah, they're like these double-page spreads. Oh, her ex-boyfriend even gets humanized. We return to him at some point. I don't know if they say exactly where she's from, but I lived in Prescott, Arizona, and this is not unusual. Like, the life that she's living, I saw kids in this life. Everyone has babies early. They have drug problems early. They all work in fast food. Like, I was there. I saw these people. It feels lived in this world.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't feel like a fantasy. There is a bit of a fantasy.
Cactus there, and actually Dave Baker is from Arizona, so...
this felt like Prescott, Arizona to me. Which, by the way, not against to Prescott, Arizona, or, there are famous people from Prescott, Arizona. But anyway, you want to get out. If you're in Arizona and you're a creative person, it's tough. It was not a good place for me as a creator. I lived there very briefly.
I see. Yeah, the ending, I don't know if I want to spoil it either, but it only just kind of occurred to me, well, just now talking to you, kind of what it might mean. So, yeah, it's interesting. It takes a while to kind of mull it over.
Which is good writing. And good collaboration. Let's talk about the collaboration for a bit, because I didn't pay attention to the credits, and I don't know these creators, and I just jumped in. And if you had asked me, I would assume this was a writer-illustrator, because it is seamless. I don't feel that there's any conflict between the two. Often in a collaboration, you could see where maybe they get off track a little bit, or they're not working Congress. This was seamless, this collaboration. I'm not surprised they've worked before. I don't know what their personal relationship is to one another, what their collaboration is like, but it doesn't feel like a collaboration. I never feel like I'm watching two collaborators try and figure something out, or three collaborators rather. There's a colorist helping them out. There's a lot of little things that really work. There's a lot of acting in here that really works. So they always say, like, a joke should be told in 3 parts, right? There's multiple times in this book where they'll take a character and put them through sort of a triptych. So there's a scene with the roommate in particular, where she's absorbing the news that Chloe got the part. Chloe goes, "I got the part." And there's 3 beats of the roommate. Her face changes a little bit, and then the roommate's like, "That's great." And you watch, like, the internal emotionality of this character without any dialogue, and it's all carried so well in the illustration. And there's a couple of parts in this book well, they'll repeat something 3 times. I'll have a character move through a space, and the space is static, but the character is moving. And the body language changes, and also the eyes. The eyes in this book are gorgeous. When she does these blow-up double-page spreads and really focuses on the facial grammar of the characters, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think my only complaint about it was that I wished Becca had a nose. She has nostrils, but sometimes in profile it seems like she doesn't have any nose. That kept kind of distracting me. But otherwise, I had no complaints about it at all. It was really an enjoyable book.
Yeah, it's a stylistic choice. The nose, the face, but it's just, you go with it. It fits this world so well.
I was wondering if it was meant to symbolize something to not have a nose. Because it seems to be a choice. It wasn't an accident that she doesn't have a nose.
No.
Is she cutting off her nose to spite her face?
No. You know what she looks like in some of these? I haven't seen it in 25 years, but I think in Pink Floyd, The Wall, the movie, sometimes they wear masks that don't have a nose.
Okay.
I don't know. It just works. I don't know if it's a nose to spite the faith. You might have been watching David Fincher's Seven. Isn't that part of Seven? Like I said, like the art, if you just flip through this art, I would think maybe this isn't for me. But once you read it, in terms of the story, this is really, really engrossing. I've become a fan of these creators. I will seek out their other work. Mm-hmm. I'm scrolling through and I'm trying to find that one. There's one moment where the lettering is not A+, and I want to ding them on something because we're here to critique comics. Where is that? There's one frisky lettering thing I did not like. But yeah, to go into this media, this world that I'm not familiar with, I just really feel like I would not have been exposed to this this whole world if not for this book. I wouldn't have wanted to go there.
Yeah, well, I mean, just knowing the topic probably would not have attracted me into picking it up, but it's not completely about internet performance art. That's just sort of the setting for it.
Yeah, there's some Hollywood stuff in here too. Sort of like the vapidness of Hollywood and how decisions get made. And if you've ever like been in a room with a Hollywood producer, you would understand how like a blue monkey would end up in a movie, which is something that I mentioned for a second. Mm-hmm. If there's anything like, I would say the lead male character, you'd never trust him. You know he's up to no good. He's just. But they never play peekaboo with that. That's never really suspenseful.
Right, yeah, and then when some other things are revealed about him, it's not terribly surprising.
No, and like, where does art come from? Did someone always do something first? I think there is a precursor to Tulip, an inspiration for Tulip. And I heard the same thing when like Lady Gaga was famous. There was someone whose look that she was sort of aping, and how art can be cyclical. I think a lot of people make careers or get their start at least aping someone else. Creative people, we always have an inspiration, right? Mm-hmm. And we'll maybe start by aping that inspiration, and then we grow our own legs and our own voice and stuff like that. So I do think it's interesting that maybe there was someone who's very similar to Tulip. At some point, someone calls her a thief. It says that she stole it from someone else, and a lot of it's tricky because you want to give credit where credit is due, but art does inspire people, and you take it and you not regurgitate it, but you sort of remix it to be something your own. You give it your own voice. And if you had given this plot, for example, to 5 or 10 different writers, we all would have executed it a little bit differently. So there is something to be said, like, how do you take your influences and make something new out of that? I thought that was an interesting thing. That was a nice swerve that they take later in the book. That there might have been someone that the male character stole this from, the Svengali. But these double-page spreads are just gorgeous. Really, really. Each one could be their own print.
Yeah, and there are quite a few of them as I'm flipping through it. A lot of double-page spreads.
God, I'm terrible with names. Did I get every single name wrong in this? I think I did.
Maybe you got some of them right.
A lot. There's some great dialogue in here too. There's a part where she runs into a friend of a friend from high school, and he just casually says, like, "You're like borderline hot now." As if that's like, a compliment.
Thanks.
Yeah, as if like that's her only value is, "Oh, look, you got pretty." It just says a lot without being overly heavy-handed without being like showgirls. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Without hitting you with a message mallet, but also like reading the comment section, everything with her parents, her dad, rather. Yeah, it's a lot of good backstory without it being too heavy. It's just enough, and this is really well done from top to bottom. And I just, if anyone is listening to this and you're on the fence, really give it a shot because it's really smart and it's really well done, and it doesn't go as you expected at all.
Everyone is Tulip is published by Dark Horse Books. It'll be in stores and in digital at the end of this month. You can help Deconstructing Comics and all our podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics, and go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. The next Critiquing Comics is coming up this Saturday. Our own Emmett has noticed that recent comics and the MCU movies have repositioned Tony Stark as a futurist billionaire in the mold of Elon Musk. He wonders if there's a danger in a billionaire being seen as a superhero. So next week he talks with Dr. Matt Finch, a strategy and foresight practitioner, about this change in the character, what might be motivating it, and what unintended consequences it might have. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.